Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Icons of Sin video game podcast. How you doing, Daz?
I'm really good, Mr. Durs. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How do you like our intro?
I very much like our intro. I think it's just extra enough for our combined personalities.
It really is. I think we picked the Icons of Sin as a name because Doom 2, obviously. But as soon as we did that, I just went as edgelord as possible. I want it to sound like we're just sat here with our katanas doing this podcast.
But the good thing about it is, it sounds like it sounds very similar to the soundtrack on the new Doom games.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
It's in that pocket.
Yeah.
So kind of goes hand in hand with the name.
There's some Doom monsters in there too.
Yeah.
So this is a video game podcast, and I think we're doing quite well. We only decided to do this last weekend, so this has come together quite nicely.
Yeah, not too bad, eh?
What are you currently playing? Before we get to our topic, what are you currently playing?
Right now?
Yes. Right
now. Right now, nothing. Currently, other than my addiction with the Binding of Isaac, which has gone on for years.
I think we can probably do an entire episode on that, because you are like the most dedicated Binding of Isaac player I have ever known. I mean, when we were filming Annette, you were talking about Binding of Isaac, and you'd put in how many hours have you put in Binding of Isaac?
Across platforms, it's probably around 6,500 now. I've got about 4,000 on Steam clocked up, and I play it on PS4 as well. So, yeah, a lot.
Are there differences between the ports?
No, nothing at all.
Okay.
It just means that when I'm away from my PC and I'm at my PS4, I can still play it.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. So other than playing that at the moment, I am currently replaying Sekiro.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Shadows Die Twice by the guys who made the Dark Souls games from Software. I gave up on it about a year ago because I got to a certain boss, couldn't get past it, gave up. But I'm back and I've beat him and I'm at the next boss and stuck there. So
stuck there. So time to rage quit again and come back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, maybe. What about yourself, Duz? What are you playing at the moment?
What am I playing at the moment? Well, I was playing Doom 2 last weekend, which is when we come up with the name The Icons of Sin.
I'll do it.
I've been playing the brutal Doom mod of Doom 2, which is great fun. Doom never gets old. I go back to Doom 2 probably more than any other game I own. And then a bit of Robocop versus Terminator on Mega Drive.
Lovely.
Which is always good fun until you lose your weapons and then you're fucked. So the gun at the start of Robocop, Robocop had the coolest gun, I think, of any character on film. That Robocop gun is amazing, but in the game it is useless. So if you lose your weapons in the later levels, you're just done. And then on PC, I've been trying to play through Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts.
Ooh.
Which is a side game, which is kind of, they're very hit and miss. Usually more miss than hit. But being Steam and being that, you can give these things a try, and then, if you think, oh, this is awful, you can refund it. I thought I'd give it a go, and it's actually probably their most competent game to date. It's really good fun.
Amazing.
It's still a bit rough around the edges, but I quite like the stealthy snipery games. So it kind of it fills that hole quite nicely.
I'll be honest, I haven't played it yet, but now that you've mentioned and sort of gone into it a little bit, I might actually get that myself and give it a shot.
It's rough around the edges, I would say that. It's not as good as like the Sniper Elite games. Those games are probably the better of the two, but it's good fun.
Yeah, I'll definitely be giving that a shot on payday, which is Monday.
Man, 6,000 hours in Binding of Isaac. That is just insane.
6,000 hours in, 6,500 in the game, and so far about 14 hours on tattoos for it as well.
Yeah, of course. Oh man, I wish that we could know how many hours we spent as kids playing video games.
Yeah, you can't clock that up, man. You can't get that back from your.
You can't.
Can't get that back from your Commodore 64, you know.
No, I can't, and I know I'm not as good as I used to be either. So no matter how hard I try, I think my old hands just don't work as well as they used to when I was a kid.
Don't put yourself down too much. You're not that old, Grandad.
Well, getting there. So this week's topic you chose. What is this week's topic?
So this week's topic is horror video games.
A favorite of mine.
Same. Seemed like an apt one to start with, didn't it?
It's a great one to start with. I thought we'd start with what were our games that we played growing up, or like introduce ourselves. But no, I like this. We're just jumping straight in horror.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
What was your first horror memories, video game wise?
Right, I've got two that stand out to me, and I can't remember which was first.
Don't worry about that.
I'm sure
someone will complain and say that one came out before the other, but go for it.
I think one definitely came out before the other, but it's which one happened first is because
Sure.
they were very close in time. So one of them was you go bowling as a kid, right?
Yeah.
The bowling alley in Swansea that I used to go to had a House of the Dead 2.
Oh, I love House of the Dead 2.
Yeah, man. It's basically Zombie Time Crisis, isn't it? Like
it's Zombie Time Crisis with even worse voice acting, which you wouldn't have thought possible, but it is.
Yeah. So I mean, I loved that because it was like maybe it was a friend's birthday. I was away from my mum. She didn't like me playing horror games or watching horror movies. I was away from her, so
yeah, get away with it.
Drop me 50p in and kill some zombies.
How far do you get with that?
Not very far at all. No. As a child, to be honest.
I used to get really far with the first one.
Yeah.
I played it enough. It was one of those, like, House of the Dead was the arcade cabinet of choice at every beach or seaside area. Yeah. It was just always House of the Dead. So I did get quite good at House of the Dead 1. House of the Dead 2 I still am not great at, but a lot of that is memorization, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's like it is sort of forming the habit and things like that, which is as a kid I wasn't very good at all, to be honest. I wasn't a good gamer as a kid. Right. But the other one that really got me was seeing my grandfather play the first Silent Hill.
Oh, now you're talking.
Because again, I was sheltered, man. I wasn't allowed to touch that stuff. And then I went round to see my grandparents one day, and he sat there on his PlayStation playing Silent Hill, and I was watching around the corner of a door because I didn't want to get caught watching, and I was in. That was it. By the time Silent Hill 2 was out, I was allowed to play horror games, Durs.
Oh, so Silent Hill 2 was your first real big horror adventure then?
That was the first horror game I completed.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Which ending?
Can't remember, mate. I think I was like
all
14.
I always think the dog ending's the best ending.
Yeah,
that's the one.
I enjoy it.
That's the one to shoot for.
What about you then, Durs? What was your first? What got you into it?
Well, I'm an old boy, so my first. I'm again like you. There are a number of games, but I think the first one that sticks out in my mind is Aliens on the Commodore 64.
Nice.
Which is an interesting game. It was actually quite terrifying as a kid to play. Having watched the movie, obviously as well, the Alien movies. So it's kind of it's a really odd to explain kind of game. You control every character from Aliens. They're all appearing on different screens. It's kind of almost got a Five Nights at Freddy's kind of vibe, unintentionally. So you've got all of the different life. You see like the life of each character, and they're all in different rooms, and you switch between the characters and try and find the aliens. And then when the aliens turn up, you have to kill them. But obviously, if you're not on the screen of the character, then they will die if the aliens turn up. Does that make sense?
I've got you. So
tense.
Friday night, Five Nights at Freddy's.
Would
you say that it was influenced by Aliens?
I don't think so. I think it's more just that the limitations of the Commodore 64 just kind of ends up kind of making it feel like that. I don't know. Maybe it did, but I think in looking back at it, I think it's just coincidence, because it's not really a Five Nights at Freddy style game. It just kind of ends up having that feel where you have to switch to different cameras because you're switching to the. Well, I always thought See, the thing is, I guess you're not. You're kind of switching to the characters. But as a kid, I always thought, you've got that scene in Aliens where they're watching from the APC, they're watching on the video cameras. I always assumed that's what I was doing, so I was like seeing through the cameras of each person, which is why I think I make the Five Nights at Freddy's thing in my mind. But I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Got you.
So,
on Aliens, funnily enough, I do remember the trilogy that came out.
Alien Trilogy.
Yeah.
I liked Alien Trilogy.
3 was my favorite. Well, Aliens. The third movie game. I always confuse the names of the Alien movies because you got Alien, Aliens, and then it's Alien 3, right?
Yeah, they skipped Alien 2.
Yeah. The game of that movie was my favorite of those. I think that's the one where you're going through like all the different sort of tunnels and things like that, right?
Yeah, it's when you get the dog aliens. Yeah, it is the best. That game was fantastic. I mean, it was very loosely based on the Alien trilogy.
Yeah,
but I really enjoyed that game. I always remember of that game actually. The facehuggers were fucking terrifying because they were so quick.
Yeah, man. Like, what was that all about?
They're just so fast. And I actually, funny enough, booted that game up about 5-6 months ago in DOSBox, and I sorted it out, had it up and running, but I'd forgotten that certain games on PC didn't limit the number of frames. Okay. So when I played it, it was playing it like full speed, like it just had no limit because they hadn't limited it. And sometimes you need to limit these old games manually to stop the game from going insanely fast.
Yeah.
So when I played it, it was proper terrifying because everything was moving really quickly.
Alien Trilogy got its nightmare mode.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Nice.
Oh, what was it? Was it like I've got acid boots or something like that was the cheat code for that game? What was that? That's just suddenly jumped in my mind for some reason.
It's real. You saying that is really familiar, so I think it might be that.
Like, but I wear acid boots or something like that. I remember that there was a cheat code for it. I remember.
Yeah, there was always a cheat code back in the day, my man.
There's always, always. Yeah. So I think Aliens, anyway, on the Commodore 64, my earliest video game memory.
Wow, that's a good first memory. I like that.
Yeah. I think I played Evil Dead on Commodore 64 as well, but certainly my first was Aliens, and the Commodore 64 was my first computer anyway, so that's where I started.
Nice.
So, yeah, Aliens.
Very nice.
So should we talk through horror? Should we talk through horror games?
Let's do it. Let's go from the depths and see where we come out, right?
Depths. Go for it.
Cool. I've been doing a little bit of looking around because
I saw you done some notes and everything. You were very professional.
Not only for the podcast, but for things to play in the future as well, if I can get my hands on them. And I was looking, it's weird because Doom being such a big influence on the podcast in general, I found an early prototype.
3D Monster Maze?
3D Monster Maze, yeah. I had no idea that this game existed, but it literally, everywhere I've looked, it appears to be the first horror game, really.
I think you could argue it's probably the first survival horror game as well, actually. And it is actually, if you can put your mind in, if you can get into the frame of mind of someone playing the game at the time, the T-Rex in 3D Monster Maze is actually quite terrifying.
Yeah. It is. The scrolling text at the bottom doesn't help either. The fact that it's kind of like a... Have you played PT?
Do you know what?
Silent...
I haven't. And to this day, it annoys me and upsets me that I never got to play PT. Okay. But I've played many PT-like games since.
Yeah, my condolences with you for not playing it, but
it's amazing.
It's insane. But what I was picking from it there was there's a radio playing over and over as you loop through these different sort of you go through different tries of escaping the house, basically.
Right.
There's a radio playing. And it's creepy as hell, and at certain points it says don't turn around and things like that, right? That when I was looking at a little sort of gameplay snippet of 3D Monster Maze, and I could see the text scrolling across the bottom of the screen, it was like a text version of that to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you know what, that I think back in 1982 that would have been creepy as hell because you don't have anything else. to compare it to.
Yeah, it's hard to go back. Sometimes if you weren't there at the time, it's hard to put yourself back in those shoes.
Yeah.
But I would recommend trying 3D Monster Maze with a view of like at the time, because it is quite scary.
Yeah. So it would have it came out 1982, so it's 3 years before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very much a game that I want to get my hands on and give a shot.
It's well worth a try.
100%. I mean, from there, it was all horror movie tributes, wasn't it?
It is a lot of adaptations of horror movies.
Yeah. So you got Halloween, Evil Dead, as you mentioned, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They all the big franchises.
Texas Chainsaw's an interesting one because you play as Leatherface.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you just kind of go around murdering people. That it's kind of just a murder simulator, really.
Yeah. There was one of them again more recently that came out, wasn't there, which was a lot more controversial. I can't remember the name of it now, but there was definitely.
Oh yes, what was the name of that? Oh, it looked awful.
You literally just go on a rampage, right? It's like a top-down murder sim.
Yeah. Oh, I can see it in my head, but I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, yeah. Gross game. Apparently, I never played it, but I read a lot about it.
But yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You're Leatherface, and you're running after screaming girls with a chainsaw, and there's just like farm equipment and stuff that gets in your way, so you have to avoid farm equipment and then chainsaw the innocent people.
I see.
So back in that time, that was quite a shock, you know.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre at that time anyway was probably one of the most controversial things that had ever been seen by the public. You know, it was
for sure.
One, it was banned in most countries. A lot of people thought some of the things in it were real.
Yeah.
You had your naive moviegoers thinking that dude in the wheelchair really got chopped up like that, you know, and
well, yeah, that was the tagline of the movie. It really happened.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously when they carried on with the movies as well, and they did the remakes and the rehashings of it, they brought that realism back in at certain points and stuff like that because it was such a staple of the franchise. Well, for the first movie anyway.
It's really interesting the way that things developed with horror in video games, because you start off early on with a lot of, or most of the games being inspired by movies, if not directly referencing movies. And then by the end, you've got movies being made of video games, and video games are like even more cinematic than a lot of the movies are.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an interesting development.
Yeah, and a lot of the movies that have come from video games have been successes as well, which is, you know, at least mainstream success to a certain degree where they make money.
They made money. Yeah, they made money.
Which is,
and I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah, there might be something about that a little later, I hear.
Excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, when I was going through looking at lists, I've been looking at YouTube videos. I found a lot of like movie or pop culture based horror games. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
I never played it, but yes, I'm aware that it exists.
Yeah, I mean that was 1990, so it was still sort of very early days in terms of how games looked.
Yeah,
as compared to what they do now in this generation. But from what I saw of it, I didn't see any Elvira at all. It just seemed like a creepy haunted house sort of game.
I'm guessing she probably just gave her name and a picture of her on the front cover, and that's probably about as far as it went. Maybe she's in the menu.
Yeah, or maybe a little final boss or something like that.
Maybe.
Where you just got to fight her boobs or something, you know? Yeah, so, I mean, for me, personally, I don't know about you, Durs, like, there was that window from 1982 when Monster Maze came out up to the early 90s where it was all very much either top-down, room by room, sort of survival, things like that, or you didn't really have much story to these games.
I mean, it was difficult to write or create a story. The only way they really managed that was with text-based adventures.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Now, I didn't actually play any text-based horror adventures, funnily enough. I played like Zork and I played Hitchhiker's Guide, The Hobbit, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I never actually played a horror text-based adventure. But I'd imagine they would have been pretty good because I think that would have worked quite well.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine so. Like again, like if you take that text scrolling from 3D Monster Maze, it is creepy to look at,
It is. I
you
think so.
know. Um, and if you're stuck there reading,
I think the police are coming to get you. They
can
disagree.
can you actually hear that?
I can. Yeah, it's all right. Don't worry.
Wow,
These things
wow,
happen.
this is a good microphone. um,
It's the
yeah,
internet,
I
boys.
mean, again, it's something to look at in the future and sort of go back to because I think text-based games can be very, very engaging, and if you add a
Yeah.
horror element to that,
Mm.
I mean, it's like reading a King novel or something like that. You know, you're in there, you're absorbed, and in some cases you're very, very frightened, which is what you want to be.
I think the thing is that and I guess we'll get to it as we go through this timeline. But I think that people like to be scared, right?
Oh
People
yeah,
love being scared.
yeah,
They love the adrenaline rush of horror movies, and that kind of tense build up and then the payoff. People like being scared. It's an addiction, and it's made so much worse when you're in control of the narrative and you're in control of the character. When you're the protagonist,
yeah.
it's so much more scary. Like I've found personally video game horror, and I'm a lifetime horror movie fan, but I have found always video game horror will always get me more than film horror
Oh
because
yeah,
I'm in those shoes, especially with later games,
yeah.
But
I
we'll
think
get to that.
yeah, there's a lot to be said for the difference between movie horror and video game horror and how engaging it can be. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, you get sucked into a point sometimes where you literally become psychologically you are that character.
Yeah.
Um, First person especially, I think is like you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Um, which is the thrill, right?
It is. It is
That's
the
why we get
thrill.
into it. Um,
So yeah, we had those times, like you said, the platforming, and
mhm,
all of those kind of times. You got um, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, all of those kind of games. You
mhm.
move into the kind of NES era. You start getting your Castlevanias and
Yeah,
ghouls and goblins, all that kind of stuff, or ghouls and ghosts. Um, a Splatterhouse, those kind of things.
yeah.
And then I would say it kind of switches around for me, I think, around the mid 90s,
The Attitude
where
Era,
the
100%.
Attitude Era,
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I agree. It was the Attitude Era of horror with the popularity of survival horror coming in.
yeah, 100%, man. This
So
is
this is where
where,
you come in as well.
yeah, this is where you start to get your big titles that again moved into movie territory as well.
Yeah,
So these were the pop culture icons of horror gaming. So
the big boys.
Resident Evil 2, Silent Hill 2. I mean, who can forget Pyramid Head shagging that mannequin? Let's be honest.
Well,
Um,
unfortunately, the people making Silent Hill games never fucking forgot him and put him into games that he had no business being in. But
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
get to that. Like you,
yeah.
I'm quite passionate about Silent Hill too, and their misuse of Pyramid Head annoys me.
I mean, it was it took my cherry. What can I say, man? It was
It's funny. Like I always think. Now I was. I'm also a PC gamer, so I have fond memories of games like System Shock, which is great
yeah,
horror series. System Shock and System Shock 2 are terrifying in places. But for me, it's really interesting when I think of horror games. If anyone says horror games, like last weekend, you were like, "Let's do horror games." As soon
yeah,
as you said that, I think PS1, PS2,
yeah, yeah,
especially
100%.
PS2. PS2 for me is like horror in a
Yeah,
box. It's just like pretty much all I ever play on PS2 these days is just horror games. But yeah, you're right. It's that time was just so iconic
yeah.
for horror games. What we'll get to Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Did you play Clock Tower much?
I did not play Clock
No,
Tower.
neither did I. I
No.
I went round a friend's house, And I've got really fond memories of him playing through one of them. I think it was on PS1, but I'm not sure what game it was.
Yeah.
And it's a series I've always wanted to go back to, but they're really expensive to get hold of now, so I just can't bring myself to part with the money. But they look fantastic, and I have really fond memories of playing Clock Tower at a friend's house on the PS1.
Yeah, I never played it, and I think that might have been at PS1 era. That's when I was still sort of very much watched in what I was accessing.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Resident Evil games I went back to play, you know, Silent Hill 2 being one that was like, I can play this game, I have this game for myself. I then went back and sort of touched on Resident Evil and things like that, and really loved certain elements of it more. Things like the inventory management and things like, you know, in that sort of survival sense where you only have a certain amount of space.
This a staple of survival horror is effectively that you don't have unlimited space. You're very limited on ammo. You're very limited on health.
Yeah.
Avoiding the enemy is preferable to fighting the enemy.
Yeah, 100%.
And it kind of goes back to the influences of horror games. You know, it's that H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
The enemies are not, you're not going to be able to fight this menace. I mean, Resident Evil, you kind of do, to be fair. Resident Evil more so than the other series. You definitely kill a number of zombies, but but there is something about that helplessness. So when you went back, let's start with Resident Evil. So you went, you played Silent Hill 2, presumably. Then you were like, well, now I can own video games. I'm going to go back and I'm going to play the Resident Evil series.
Yeah, I had such a thrill over Silent Hill 2. I had such a rush from playing it. That's exactly what I did. I was like, right, okay, crack out the PS1. My friends have got Resident Evil. Let's borrow that. You know, and it just kind of went from there.
So, you're in the house.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing as Jill or Chris, and you're walking down a seemingly innocent hallway with some windows on one side. How did that make you feel?
You know what? That literally, the way you described that took me straight back to the memory.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's horrible in the nicest way.
It's amazing. I don't know anyone, as a kid, I don't know anyone that, excuse me, I didn't know anyone that didn't jump at that moment.
Oh.
And then you go and play the director's cut and they switch things around. So the director's cut of Resident Evil, they move things around, and from memory, I don't think the dogs jump out where you think they will, and then they jump out later.
Evil.
Such a good, that is a moment that's ingrained in my mind, that dog moment, and to the point that we played it. I think a friend of mine owned it, and we were playing it around his house. And then when I finally got the game, I knew that the dogs were there, and I just didn't want to walk down there. It's just like, you know, it gets to that point and I'm like, well, I have to go down there to continue with the game, but I just don't want to go. And I just have my character there at the start of that screen, just waiting, like, oh no, I've got to go down there.
Yeah, I kind of have to do it, don't I?
I have to.
And they're so bad to look at now, but at the time, those dogs were terrifying zombie dogs.
They really were.
They were.
And in fact, they did a really good job with the remake of Resident Evil 1. Actually, I know we're going to get to remakes.
Mm-hmm.
The Resident Evil 1 remake is actually really, really good for the GameCube. I think they remastered it on PS4 and stuff. Really good. So then Resident Evil 2. Now, I loved Resident Evil 1. And I remember being disappointed when they first were showing Resident Evil 2, because I was like, oh, I wanted it to be in the mansion, because for me it was all about that creepy mansion.
Yeah.
And I never thought, I didn't want to leave that. I just wanted to go to another creepy mansion. But my God, when I played Resident Evil 2, it was a game changer.
It's a weird one because it turns the game into a world more than anything. It gives you more elements of the story outside of that one building. You've now got more to look at.
It's and I really I love the expanding of that world, and that narrative is great, because Resident Evil, you're like, oh, this is just in the mansion, and it could just be in the mansion, and we defeat the tyrant at the end of Resident Evil, and that could be the end. That could be the end of it. But then you get to the sequel and you're like, oh no, it's not. It's spread throughout the whole city. The whole time I was in the mansion, this has been going on in the city.
Yeah.
And that opening is one of the most iconic openings. That cinematic,
Yeah,
with the truck driver and all of that stuff. That is ingrained in my mind. What was your impression of Resident Evil 2?
I think at the time I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I enjoyed it as a game more than the first.
I agree. And I didn't think I would.
However, looking back on it now, I see it as the opening for what became Raccoon City, Umbrella Corporation, and the movie franchise and all the money that made. I think Res 2 is where that really sort of kicked in, and the idea of, hold on, we can make this a universal thing came from.
Sure. It definitely expanded it, didn't it?
Yeah.
It definitely did. Because once it's happening everywhere, you can just create new scenarios and characters. Kind of a genius move on their part.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because they could have very easily just said, okay, it's in a different mansion, and they're doing it again, you know? And it just wouldn't have been, it would have been fine as a sequel.
Resident Eviler.
Yeah, Resident slightly eviler. It's a way more it's a way more smart move with a sequel to go down that route. Make it a city, expand the universe. Yeah, it's great. I love that. I went back and played Resident Evil 2. I want to say 3 years ago now. I went back and I played through both stories, and it has aged remarkably well. Once you kind of put yourself in that mindset, it's still a tremendous game. It still holds up.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. I think the iconic games that the titles we're going through now in the Attitude Era, then they are timeless. I think a lot of the big names from that era, they stand the test of time. Whether it's the original, if you're looking at playing a remake of it, it tends to kick ass. And anything else that's come from that franchise as well, you just buy into it.
Yeah, you do. So we'll come back to Resident Evil when we get to the PS2.
Let's do that.
You're at your granddad's house.
Yep.
And he is playing Silent Hill, and you're watching from the corner of the room. What the fuck do you think you're seeing? Because that game is messed up, right?
So here's the thing, right? I missed most of the gameplay.
Okay.
When I visited, he was in one of the final chapters of the game.
Okay.
The daughter is very much active then, shall we say, in the end part of that game. And I'm at that point where I'm seeing this guy trying to find his daughter.
Yeah.
Who's now become super evil for some reason that I can't explain. And I was blown away. I was just at the point where I was just like, I need to know how this got to this point. And I'm saying this as me. What was I? What was it? 99 it came out. I was
somewhere around there.
I think it was like 13. And I was kind of like still very naive for a 13-year-old at that point. I was kind of like, what is going on? What is this? I need answers. And I spoke to him afterwards, and he was like, you shouldn't have seen me do that. And then it just got to that point where I was like, what? I have to find out for myself. And I begged and I begged. And then Silent Hill 2 was sort of announced, and it was on its way out, and I was told I could have it. Yeah. I loved what I could see in that limited space of time. And it made me want to know more, and that's what sucked me in.
See, that's the thing. It scared you, but yet you wanted to see more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key with horror, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is that. It is that I don't want to walk down that hallway because the dogs will jump out and get me, but I want to continue this story.
It's the adrenaline, man.
It is. Absolutely.
I mean, some people turn to substance. Some people turn to horror movies or horror gaming. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely, I turn to both. So, moving on from the Attitude Era into the PS2, which PS2 Xbox era for me defines the horror genre for me. The Silent Hill games, Silent Hill 2. So this is the first game that you've bought yourself.
Yes.
Right. This is your game.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What were your experiences like with Silent Hill 2? You open with that cinematic in the toilet. He's come to find his girlfriend, who is already dead, but has asked him to come to Silent Hill.
Yes, very creepy, right?
Immediately creepy and immediately
off.
disconcerting and just weird.
Yeah. This plot for me was the inspiration for Alan Wake, but that's all I'll say on that for now.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah, Alan Wake, again, I loved it, but I think there was a lot of this plot that was like, how can we do that now? And they kind of made Alan Wake from that. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, I think that opening and then all of a sudden the car, the fog.
I think the walk through the woods as well, that long tense, because it seems to go on forever when you're walking through those woods, and you can just occasionally hear things in the woods. It just builds so much atmosphere, even more so than I think Silent Hill 1. Silent Hill 2 just bleeds atmosphere everywhere.
I think... Sorry.
Go on. No, go for it.
I was going to say, I think, just slight tangent, what I think was really, really good with Silent Hill 2 was the difficulty was also a puzzler difficulty. So when you increase difficulty in the game, you were also increasing the difficulty of the puzzles you had to overcome.
That's something that they kept through the Silent Hill games from memory. Whenever you up the difficulty, and in fact, on some later games, I think you could choose like enemy difficulty versus puzzle difficulty.
So cool, man. So cool. Like,
it's a great idea.
Sometimes you just want to rearrange mannequins into a certain order, or like torsos hanging into a certain order, so that you can get into the next room for some reason.
I love that game's. That game has some terrific ways of directing the player.
Oh yeah.
Because when you get into that city, when you get into that area, you don't know where you're going. But the way it directs you, there's like that blood smear going around the corner, and you're like, I guess I should probably go that way. And it's very good game design, because it does actually tell you as a new player where to go.
You know what? That was an element that completely skipped my mind. The fact that you have those like L-shaped or R-shaped then to lead you to the right, for example, blood smears and things like that. And and again, the way they're designed, you can actually see the direction that was made in. You could see which way the body was dragged, which for early 2000s, that's PS2 game, that's really well done.
It's really good game design. And then you come across that first enemy in the tunnel.
Yes,
with a stick.
Yes, like all of this is coming back to me so well now that you say it. You've got such a good memory for this game, man. It's weird because a lot of my memories of it now are end game or mid game puzzling.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean that's where the thing really ramps up.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. I think for me, like I was just thinking initial memories of that initial encounter and that initial walk into the city, and amazing game. Game.
So good.
I think it's one of the best written horror games.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that. That's very true.
And Pyramid Head as a villain in Silent Hill 2. It obviously works in Silent Hill 2. There's a reason Pyramid Head is there, and it is unique to that protagonist, which is why it kind of annoys me when he turns up in later games.
Yeah.
Sorry. But what did you think when you first you're hiding in the cupboard, right? You're hiding in the cupboard and you're looking out and you see Pyramid Head fucking this crazy
four-legged mannequin,
to death. I mean, what did you think when you first saw that? I mean, it's so unique.
Well, I think the thing that got me the most is the start of that scene, the start of that cutscene. You actually walk into the room.
Yes.
If you remember, and it's on your left, and you sort of sneak by in his line of sight almost, but he's obviously up to other things, so he doesn't really notice you there, and then you get into the cupboard.
Yes, that's right. I'd forgotten that.
I think that for me is the most terrifying part of that. It was just kind of like, oh my god, I'm like 2 foot away from him. We are just about just under social distancing levels, maybe.
We are, yeah. It's a small room. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot of room, and it is one of those moments when you're like, oh my god, is this like, have I got to fight this thing right now? I've got no ammo. I'm not prepared for this at all. It's a real shocking moment, because usually when you see a cinematic introducing a boss in a game, you're like, I've got to fight that right now.
Yeah,
and Silent Hill doesn't do that. It builds up that encounter, because that whole time you're in that residential block, it's kind of building up the Pyramid Head thing.
Yeah,
and he's there, and you're going to have to face him before you leave this building.
Yeah, and that he's this sort of almost shadow character that you know nothing about.
No, absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, he's having his way with this four-legged nurse mannequin. I don't even know how to describe them. And he's doing that, and it's just kind of like, hold on a minute. This creature has some form of like human element to it, but
that's the thing with all of them. The sexy nurses with no face and things like that. It all kind of it's human enough. It's got a humanish shape, because if it was just like weird random creatures, I don't think it would be as scary. But it is the fact that they do resemble human form that it really is creepy. The design in Silent Hill, and not just in Silent Hill 2, in a lot of the Silent Hill series, the designs are superb for the creatures. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the scene, I believe it's in 2 again, where you've got all the nurses stood in a dark room.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of walk through them.
Yeah. Don't try and fight them.
Yeah, is that in 2?
I think that's 2.
And I think the lights sometimes come on and they activate them or something like that. I don't know. It's a long time ago, but
that might have been. I think that's Silent Hill 2.
Yeah.
Because again, the nurses kind of belong to that protagonist as well. It all kind of makes sense for that protagonist.
Yeah. And they just twitch and love it.
It's great. It is great.
And hate it.
And you have to learn. You have to learn, especially with scenes like that. You cannot fight that. You just need to avoid.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of survival horror, really.
Yeah, man.
Is fight only when you absolutely have to. Otherwise, avoid.
Oh yes, because you've got like 4 bullets and 20 nurses. And in that sort of area, you're just going to get swarmed, aren't you? So.
Absolutely. So what are the series? Actually, let's continue with Silent Hill. Silent Hill 3. What did you think of Silent Hill 3?
I put it off for a long time.
Oh, no. Just because of your love of Silent Hill 2.
I took a bit of a hiatus from gaming for a little while, even.
Okay. You find women.
I found guitars.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is around the time, when I was sort of 16, 17, I started playing in bands and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And that took everything, it took up all my time.
Sure.
So I did put off Silent Hill 3 for a long time. And when I came back, it felt a little dated.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, and I think that's my fault.
Yeah, I mean, I think Silent Hill 3 definitely has some graphical improvements, and it does move things forward.
Yeah.
I still think Silent Hill 2 is the strongest of all the Silent Hill games, I think.
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, I'd say that too.
But 3 I think is underrated. 3 is very good. It's a very good game.
Maybe as an adult now, going back and playing it might be a good idea.
And if you don't know the story of 3, if you play it through to the end, I think it links back very well.
Oh, okay.
To past Silent Hill games. I don't want to ruin it, so I would highly recommend playing through 3.
You know what? That's what I'm going to do then. I'll play through it this week, and then I'll give you an update next week or when we do the next cast.
So you kind of missed that. So you missed Silent Hill 3. Did you miss Silent Hill 4 as well?
I did. Yes.
You did. Okay.
So I went back and did 3.
You went back and you did go back and do 3.
I went back and started 3. Felt a little out of it. Maybe it feels a little bit not quite what's coming around these days. It feels a little bit old and
bit stiff. Those controls are quite stiff when you go back to them.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I didn't play 4 then. I kind of didn't finish 3 by a long shot, and then I didn't play 4 for my sins. But again, it's something that at this moment in time, we have all the time in the world, right?
Absolutely, and I would say that there is a definite decline in this series, as there is, in my opinion, with Resident Evil 2. But Silent Hill has a steep decline for me. Silent Hill 2 is the pinnacle for me. Silent Hill 3, I think, is a tremendous successor to Silent Hill 2. The Room was clearly a different game. It was never a Silent Hill game. They were making a completely different game and decided that, no one's going to probably buy this game where you're just in a room. So let's call it Silent Hill, and then people will play it. I do think it's a good game, though. I don't think that Silent Hill 4 is terrible. I think it's got some great moments. But after Silent Hill 4, it just really goes downhill, unfortunately. It's a steep decline.
There is one that came after Silent Hill 2. Not a full game. PT is obviously Silent Hills, wasn't it? It was the demo for Silent Hills.
It was.
Which was going to be I think it was Guillermo del Toro directed
it was
game, which didn't happen.
Isn't it Hideo Kojima as well?
It was Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, yeah. And the main protagonist was going to be what's his name? The guy from The Walking Dead, the one with the bow and arrow.
Yes.
Norman Reedus.
Norman Reedus,
yeah. But he's obviously ended up in Death Stranding instead, which is another Kojima game.
Yeah.
But yeah, the original plan was PT was the demo for Silent Hills, which going by PT was going to be terrifying and amazing.
The great thing is that even though that was just a demo, it inspired
so much.
I mean, Layers of Fear, all of those kind of games have come from just this demo. That's how influential that demo was.
I think Evil Within's had some sort of form of take from it as well. Some of the ways that the games in the last sort of 5-6 years have come out and given you that, basically made you shit your pants. It's because PT was so scary.
And it really was.
Yeah.
I wish I'd played it.
Yeah, I mean,
gutted. I've played a lot of games like it. Like I said, since then, I think because people were so disappointed that PT didn't get made.
Yeah.
People have gone, I'm going to make it myself.
Yeah.
So there's lots of those on Steam and such, and they're tremendous. Like, I really enjoyed Layers of Fear.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people didn't. It's great. Has one major flaw, Layers of Fear. I don't know if I want to say it because it will ruin it to anyone that wants to play it. I'll say it. Sod it. If you don't want to hear, skip like 10 seconds ahead. The main problem with Layers of Fear for me is the moment you realize that you can never get killed.
Yeah.
You just don't die. The monsters never hurt you.
Yeah.
Once you realize that, the fear of the game is gone. But it's an amazing haunted house simulator.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And then you're just left with layers then, aren't you? Let's be honest. But tell you what, on the subject of PT, a game coming out this year. I think it was supposed to come out in 2018, but it was delayed by the looks of it. Is a game called Visage.
I've seen that. That looks great.
Yeah, very PT-esque. I'd say if you gutted you couldn't play PT, maybe play Visage.
I'm definitely going to give it a go. It's on my radar.
Yeah, same.
I think
cannot wait.
I think if Konami aren't going to do anything with Silent Hills, then I'm all for other people doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
go on.
I'm not sure whether to continue with the PS2 stuff or move forward. Should we move forward? It feels like we're moving forward.
Were we looking Xbox, PS3, Xbox 360, PS3 sort of era where we had like Dead Space?
Dead Space. Now, actually, briefly back on PS2 before we go there, I have to say one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, Project Zero or Fatal Frame elsewhere in the world.
Fatal Frame, Crimson Butterfly.
Oh, I love those games so much. Those for me are probably the scariest of the PS2 games.
A lot of that is camera lens, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, it's a third person game, much like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but it kind of goes back to that old myth of a person being able to steal someone's soul with a camera.
Yeah.
And it kind of uses that. So you don't have any weapons in the game. All you have is the camera obscura, which is this camera that you find, and that allows you to steal the soul of ghosts. So basically, you're walking around, and then you have to take the photos of the ghosts. But you can't really see the ghosts until you look through the camera. So you're just walking around, and then your controller starts vibrating, and the screen kind of goes funny, and you're like, "Oh, there's something here," and you have to go get your camera. And as soon as you get your camera, it goes into a first-person perspective, and then you have to try and take photos of the ghost as they appear and attack you. But those games, especially the second one, the second and third ones, really kind of ramp it up. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Amazing. Yeah, again, like Crimson Butterfly was one that I came across when I was sort of researching.
Yeah.
And it gave me a little bit of an Outlast, kind of early Outlast prototype kind of vibe. Now that you've explained it a little bit more, though, maybe not so much. Maybe it's just the fact that you have a camera.
Yes, yeah, it is just the fact that you've got a camera. It's much more in the vein of a Silent Hill or Resident Evil game, really. It's just the action mechanic is a camera in first-person perspective.
Nice.
Terrifying series.
You know what? I've come away from researching this with more titles to check out than I've actually brought to the table, which is
good though, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And of course, Call of Cthulhu on Xbox was tremendous.
There's another Lovecraft title for you.
Lovecraft title. One scene in that game in particular where you're trapped in your hotel room with this angry mob trying to break down the door to kill you when you have no weapons is a terrifying scene. Have you played Call of Cthulhu? The Xbox title?
I've seen clips of it, which
doesn't do it justice. You're kind of in this hotel room because you go to sleep for the evening. You're a private investigator. You come to this town. They don't want you there for reasons. And you go to sleep that evening, and you wake up to the sound of an angry mob and people fumbling for locks and trying to open the doors. You've locked the door, so they then start trying to bash the door in, and you basically have to escape this apartment and locking the doors behind you, moving stuff in front of the doors, trying to protect yourself from this angry mob that are just about to burst through the door and kill you. And it is one of the most stressful moments in video games that I remember. Trying to escape that whole situation was terrifying.
You may be happy, I don't know if you've heard of this yet, but you may be happy to hear that there is a Cthulhu release in the works.
They made one, there was one that came out last year or the year before, but I've not played it. But I didn't know there was a new one.
Yeah, Book of Ancients.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Cthulhu Book of Ancients. It's you can find the trailer on like YouTube and stuff at the moment. It's set for end of summer, I believe.
Nice.
And it looks very, very, very good.
Oh,
I won't go too much into it, other than the fact that Cthulhu plays a big part in the storyline.
My boy Cthulhu
Your
plays
boy.
a big part. So, PS3, Xbox 360, we get Resident Evil 4.
We do.
Now, did you play Resident Evil 4 when it came out?
I played Resident Evil 4 probably about a year late.
Okay, so it was still current. It wasn't outdated like you found Silent Hill 3.
No,
it was pretty much cutting edge.
Yeah, I mean, Res 4 is something I've played in the last few years as well, and now it does feel a little bit clunky. But
certainly.
But I mean, we're talking at the time when I played it, it was a great game. I thought it wasn't the best for me. So
I agree.
So, me, Res 2 still stands out, and Nemesis as well still stand out as big titles.
You know, we completely skipped Nemesis, didn't we? I just realised.
Not in my heart. Not in my heart.
Not in my heart either. The only thing I'd say on Nemesis is the concept of this Nemesis creature was genius. That's the thing that I'd say above anything else. If we're briefly touching on Resident Evil 3, the Nemesis as a character turning up, it terrified me. Absolutely terrified. Absolutely. Every time you heard that stars, I was like, oh god, oh no. So Resident Evil 4 changes the game, right? For better or worse, changes the game.
Yeah, because it goes into more of a villagey type vibe, doesn't it?
And more of an action orientated vibe.
more of a third-person shooter than
Yeah.
a survival horror. Yeah,
It keeps some elements. You still have the limited inventory, and you still have the you are unable to move while shooting, so you can't run and shoot at the same time in Resident Evil 4.
yeah.
So every time you get your gun out, you stop. So there is that kind of, there's still that element, and there's certainly horror elements. I mean, I remember the first time. Well, let me ask you your first experience when you're leaving that building, and then some guy runs at you with a chainsaw.
Yeah, you shit yourself.
You, especially when you
You
realize
shit
that's a
yourself.
one-hit kill. He will kill you in one hit.
Yeah,
Anytime you see a chainsaw guy, quite rightly, you die.
and I died over and over again. I died to that guy.
Do you know what? I kind of exploited the game a bit. I
Okay.
ended up using the sniper rifle and sniping him from a distance before he actually did much.
Well, I mean, if the game gives you the tools, man, you're allowed
it
to use
does,
them.
right? Terrifying moment though.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it was a really cool, had a really cool vibe. It almost had a Lovecraftian vibe to that whole game, actually, with these kind of backwoods villagers, like isolated community of people. I really enjoyed Resident Evil 4 when I played it through.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I expected to. I'll put it that way. I thought, okay, we're at the 4th in the series. Are we really going to do this? How are we going to top Nemesis? And we don't, but I still enjoyed the game.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I've always felt personally that as good as Resident Evil 4 is, I always felt that Code Veronica should have been Resident Evil 4. It feels more like Resident Evil 4 to me than
I can see that.
4 does. I really loved Code Veronica. But Resident Evil 4, I think, as great as it was, for me, I always associate it with the decline of the Resident Evil series.
Yeah, because when you go into it then, like up until I'd say Biohazard, you have problems.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't have that same draw.
I think the problem is, and it's interesting because I think people often, obviously, maybe quite rightly, blame the developers and Capcom for going in that action-orientated direction with 5 and 6, increasingly so.
Yeah.
But I really think when you play through those games, when you play through 4, 5, and 6, in a row, you quickly realize that I think as much as you may dislike Resident Evil 6 or 5, I think we need to take some of the blame for that, because Resident Evil 4 came out and everyone went mental about how great it was, revolutionary, this is the direction. And I really think that Capcom saw that and went, okay, people want action. They want to move away from the survival horror and into action. And when you play Resident Evil 6, I do think Resident Evil 6 actually is a good game in that style. It's kind of the natural progression of 4. It's like if you wanted to go in that 4 direction, this is what you get. It's not for me. I prefer the survival horror. That's what I want from Resident Evil. But I can kind of see why they went in that direction after 4 because of that popularity.
Yeah, I think one take I had on it was, I think from the movie franchise actually hitting the way it did.
Oh, of course, yes.
Some of those later titles, I think, may have took influence because they were action movies.
They were, absolutely.
You had Mila Jovovich, like, she was a superhero almost in those movies. And
doesn't she goes up against Nemesis in the second one, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
and defeats Nemesis,
like,
I believe.
Close quarters combat.
Yeah. Not even like with a gun shooting. It's like no, she just pretty much punches the shit out of him. Yeah, from what I remember.
She might as well have 1-inch punched him. Like it was that much actually a martial arts scene.
She is the one punch man of Resident Evil.
But you know what? If I was going to get punched by anyone in that series, it would be her. So, I think that's my kind of take on it. Is that I think a lot of the action elements were sort of maybe swayed because Capcom did have a big part to play in the movies as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I think maybe a lot of that may have inspired those later titles to take more of an action sort of oriented playthrough
approach. Yeah, well, absolutely. So we will get to Biohazard, but sticking with PS3, as you quite rightly said earlier, we had Alan Wake.
We did.
I think it's quite a good game. But what did you think of Alan Wake?
Alan Wake for me reminded me plot-wise. We've already discussed one element of it, but another element of that plot. It reminded me of the way Stephen King writes his novels.
It came with a novel, right?
Yeah,
or one of the versions did.
It was very like he's a writer.
Yes.
A lot of Stephen King's protagonists are writers. He writes from his own perspective a lot of the time.
It's the best way to write.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole wife situation comes from Silent Hill, as we were saying.
Yeah.
There's creepy Hicktown characters.
Yep.
I loved Alan Wake.
I really enjoyed it. I've not played American Nightmare. I've not played it.
I played a bit of it and kind of was like, this isn't my Alan Wake.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I kind of stopped, but I was on tenterhooks waiting for that release. And I was really
enjoy that mechanic. The flash, the action mechanics in that game I really like with the flashlight. I love that. I think that was a genius stroke.
Oh yeah, it's incredible because like literally it's your only tool.
Yeah, absolutely, and it kind of takes me back to that Project Zero kind of vibe where that's your only chance is a camera or your only chance is a flashlight. It's not a conventional weapon, you know. I really like that, and it kind of adds to that almost helplessness as well, where you're like, this is not what I would call a weapon. I feel much safer if I had, Nemesis. I'm running around with like a machine gun, and you know,
exactly.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I've just got a flashlight now. That's really creepy, and I think Alan Wake does atmosphere extremely well. Almost, it is almost that it's the successor to Silent Hill in that way, where you get that real atmosphere.
I think that's what pulled me in as well, was the likeness to it.
Yeah.
As I was saying, I think there's a lot of influence from Silent Hill. I think with the flashlight thing as well, you know, you have that spark that went off when you were successful.
Yeah.
Where it would just go and the demon was gone.
Yeah.
That for me is an image that will always come back to me when I think of horror gaming.
Really?
Because it's unique.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
It's very unique, and it's, you know, like you were saying, it's a dynamic to horror gaming that is very rare. Because in most games you can pick up a knife or a gun, and you might have limited ammo, but you've got it. You know what I mean? Res Evil games, there's a chance you might find a more powerful gun or a chainsaw at some point. You know, it's Alan Wake for me was a game changer at the time.
It was, and I really enjoyed Alan Wake as well. So we're into the PS3 era, and then along comes Dead Space.
Yeah.
What were your memories of Dead Space?
Right, so here's the thing, right? You put your spacesuit on, right, at the start, and everything seems, all right, okay, we're just going through the spaceship, and as soon as you see those things, it's a totally different game. There's one part early on in Dead Space where you run into a lift, and you run into the lift, and you know they got these like blade arms, right? These monsters, and the two blade arms come through the lift almost like it's Terminator 2 or some shit, right?
Because you think you're safe, you've reached the lift.
Yeah. And then it bursts the door open, and then all of a sudden gets crushed by the door. Yeah. And it's like, man, like I had to change my underwear. After that, it was Dead Space 2 for me brought, because the graphical changes as well, the advancements when it came to that gen of console, it brought to me a new level of horror. Let's put it that way.
Dead Space 2.
Dead Space 2.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was an amazing game series. I think it's obviously, I think it wears its influences on its sleeve. It's very obviously The Thing, which was another PS2 game. You know, we need to move on from PS2 because I could stay on PS2 forever now that I think about it. But it's obviously got that The Thing element, movie The Thing. It's also got System Shock. It's very System Shock. I mean, it's effectively System Shock.
Yeah.
to an extent. But things I always remember of the Dead Space series, I love that the HUD. I love the way that comes up in front of you and all of that stuff. I think that's tremendous, that kind of holo display, which I kind of hate in movies, but I really like in this game. It works really well. I even like the nav finder, the waypoint finder.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get lost in some of these games, and I do quite like. I use it very sparingly in Dead Space, but when I'm completely stuck, I'm like, where am I going? And I can just press that button, and I'm like, oh, that's where I need to go next. I know where I need to go. But I think the biggest game changer for the Dead Space series is after decades of aiming for the head. You come to Dead Space, and you're like, right, die, shoot it straight in the head, and it does very little.
Yeah.
That for me was the game changer. And then no monster's the same. You don't know what you have to cut off, because the gimmick with Dead Space is that you can't just shoot your target in the head and it'll die. Sometimes you shoot them in the head, it'll do next to nothing. What you have to do is dismember the creatures, and that's what kind of what separates it.
Yeah, and it adds that extra element of gore and do you remember the creepy little children monsters?
Yes.
Oh, don't.
Do you know the other scenes I really like and I find really unsettling in the Dead Space series are the moments that you go into space and you've got that muted sound and you've just got like almost next to no sound, but you can just see them coming and you don't know whether they're behind you, you don't know where they are because, obviously you're in space, there's no noise. I love those scenes. Those scenes are great.
Yeah, I mean, it takes aliens in space, nobody can hear you scream to another level. It just...
Yeah. Well, it's so much more immersive when you're playing that character, when you are that character.
Yeah, 100%.
I wasn't so keen on Dead Space 3. I think they lost it there for me.
I didn't play it, if I'm honest.
Probably for the best, to be honest.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's not so good. 1 and 2 are fantastic games, and I really hope that soon they'll go back to that series, because that's a series of games that I think we could go back to with the current generation of consoles and PCs and stuff, and just go there.
100%.
Dead Space, fantastic.
100%, so looking forward from there.
Yeah, let's move forward.
I found things. The next big hit for me was around about 2012, 2013.
Amnesia,
Outlast.
Yep. The weaponless horror games. Going back to 3D Monster Maze, you have no weapon.
Yep. And Outlast for me, being the highlight, if I'm honest. I think the night vision was something that really sort of struck by me. Having the only way that you can see in some rooms is by reserving your battery power.
Yeah,
it brought survival horror back.
It did. I think for me it was actually Amnesia that did that.
Yeah.
Or actually, I played a couple of games which I think are by the same studio before they made Amnesia. I think it was Penumbra.
I haven't played Penumbra. I've heard of it though.
I think that's what they were called, and they're very similar. They're kind of like you can see the direction they were going was Penumbra into Amnesia, so Amnesia for me was the one that did that kind of hiding in the shadows from these horrendous creatures, and the water scene in Amnesia is just it still haunts me to this day.
Oh, don't. I get, like, I know you might
stresses me out thinking about it.
You might hear me say things like, "Oh, don't," every now and then. I genuinely shudder when I think about certain things.
And that's one of them, right?
That is one of them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's terrifying scene. Terrifying.
Yeah.
So for you, Outlast, going into this mental asylum with a camera, and running for your life. What did you make of that game? I mean, that is a tremendous horror game in my opinion.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's elements to that game that are just downright creepy. Like, you sneak into a room where there's just a bunch of crazy people sat around looking at dead TV screen, like just white noise on a TV, and you're like, they're gonna kill me, but you can walk straight past them.
But they might not.
They're so absorbed in it because they're so broken mentally.
Yeah.
They don't touch you. And then you go through that room, down another corridor, past somebody in a wheelchair who does nothing. You come back and he attacks you.
Yeah.
I shot myself. I genuinely put down my controller and went, nope. Yeah.
It
I
is
loved
a
it.
terrifying experience. And moving on from that, finally taking me back to my first ever horror video game experience.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens Colonial. No, fuck off. Alien Isolation.
Sorry, were you just about to say Colonial Marines?
I was fucking around. Alien Isolation is just amazing. I honestly have never played, including Alien Trilogy, Aliens, all the Aliens games that I've ever played. I have never felt like I was in the Alien universe like I did with Alien Isolation. The work that they've put into crafting that game and crafting that world, it is like being in the movie.
Yeah. And the xenomorph looks amazing.
And behaves amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like, I don't know whether... Do you know how they made that? Was it down to puppetry, or you know what I mean, where they put a suit on and sort of motion capture, or...
I have no idea, but it does move very naturally. I remember there being some criticism of it, saying like, "Oh, I don't like the way the alien moves," and I think that's because people are coming off of Aliens and they're being like, "Oh, it doesn't move like they do in Aliens." But that creature in Alien Isolation, it moves like the alien from Alien.
Yes.
Which was a lot more slow and kind of human-like movements.
Yeah.
I loved Alien Isolation, and it terrified me several times. Not just the alien, but also the androids.
Yeah, I can see that, because the androids are in the franchise, they are pretty large antagonists at times, aren't they?
I mean, Ash was terrifying in Alien.
Yeah,
he was almost as terrifying as the alien. That scene where they hit his head off and stuff.
Yeah,
horrendous.
And I think David in obviously the newer titles as well.
Sure.
Is very much he can be a terrifying character.
Yes. I mean, Michael Fassbender's just that good, really.
Yeah. I like, put him in anything and it's amazing. But yeah.
So what did you think of Alien Isolation?
Again, it was one of those where I had to walk away a few times.
Me too.
It was getting too intense at times, and you start to overthink. You start to you're so absorbed then that you feel the fear that character should be feeling.
I agree. It's one of the few times in a horror game where I've been completely paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't mean like I said, Resident Evil 2, I had reluctance to run down the corridor, but I did it. There were times in Alien Isolation where I'd be in a room hidden under a table and I could see where the alien was over the other side and I knew where I needed to go, but I was just too terrified to move because I knew if I moved, it would come and get me. It moves so quickly. It is a tremendous horror experience.
Yeah. That is, I have a list of what I was going to call honorable mentions, things that you should 100% play if you haven't already, and that is on the list. I think we should do that
at the end. Yeah, it's on my list as well.
Yeah, that is there. So we match on that one.
We do.
Yeah.
And then I guess we've got the creepypasta stuff, right?
Yeah, we do. So we have Slender, the 8 pages based on Slender Man. For me personally, I was invested because I was a big fan of the Marble Hornet series. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't.
You haven't? The Marble Hornet series.
Hang on a minute. Is that the guy that did the ever increasingly creepy YouTube videos?
Yes.
I love that. I didn't know what it was called. I was trying to find that a couple of weeks ago because I was like, I remember, because those videos, if I remember rightly, they just start off like just someone fucking around with a camera and like nothing really happens for several of those videos, and then slowly but surely it gets more and more creepy. Am I thinking of the right thing? Yeah, so the concept of it is Marble Hornet is a movie that the cameraman is trying to make. That's right.
And he's out filming scenes, and then slowly but surely he starts seeing, say, Slender Man off in the distance in a field.
That's right.
And then as it goes, that person disappears. Somebody else takes, somebody that was on the crew takes his equipment and starts watching the tapes, and that's where Marble Hornets, the YouTube series, starts.
Right.
Very, very well done.
It is.
again, it was something that you get to a certain point and it starts to get creepy. I paused it a few times. I might have sort of gone across the little frame finder at the bottom of YouTube and just checked what was going to happen before I watched it a few times. But yeah, that really got me into Slender Man and creepypasta in general.
Creepypastas are great, and Slender the 8 Pages was a phenomenon. I mean, everyone played that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was played to the point of almost becoming a meme. It was, because it was just everywhere. It blew up.
Yeah, it really did. And then, of course, we got Slender the Arrival, which was the first quote-unquote full game experience of Slender Man. My funnily enough, my fondest memory of Slender Arrival was playing it for the first time, going around the house, that creepy house, trying to find the pages and stuff. And I was like, there's a slide. And I was joking to my friend, and I was like, let's go play on the slide. I just went outside and went down the slide, and I got an achievement for going down the slide in a horror game, which I thought was
so good.
Tremendous. So good. Slender Man was a phenomenon. When that came out, that game came out.
Yeah, I mean, Slender Man as a being, as a creepypasta, has been a phenomenon in both good and bad ways. Let's be honest. But
well, of course.
Yeah. But I mean, it was one of those creepypastas that stuck with me for, I'd probably say, watching Marble Hornets probably around 2010, up until the unfortunate events that happened in America.
Yeah,
I was fully invested that whole time in Slender Man.
Yeah, and it has kind of gone on to inspire so many other things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a movie now.
There is. I wouldn't recommend it, but there is a movie.
Yeah, it's not the best.
It's not.
But yeah, I mean, as far as creepypastas go, he's your guy, right?
He is, and now we have new creatures, Pyramid Head, Siren Head, and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it really kind of goes back and starts with Slender in terms of video games, anyway.
100%, and it was all based off a competition, wasn't it? Somebody needed to write a creepy story.
They succeeded.
Yeah, it definitely worked, and those pictures that they supplied with it as well are just awful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you got like the playground and the kids being walked off into the distance. I don't know who's taking those pictures, but I think they're an accomplice in some way. Let's be honest.
Yeah, they are.
Maybe it's Maskey from the series. Maybe Maskey took the pictures.
Yeah, maybe. So, we've given up on Resident Evil games being survival horror. We have some great entries, side entries. Revelations, the Revelation series was great, but in terms of the core Resident Evil series, survival horror is dead. And then along comes Resident Evil 7.
Biohazard. The game of 2017.
I agree.
Yeah.
A very different game. When I played the demo, I thought it was good, but I thought it's not Resident Evil at all. Yeah. And that vibe kind of goes on when you play the game. I thought probably for the first couple of hours, I was just like, it's not really Resident Evil. But slowly and surely, it becomes more and more Resident Evil.
Initial thoughts were, this is the Sawyer family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is where I am. I'm going to be tied to a chair while they're eating my body parts, having a nice breakfast. But you're right. As the game develops, it does change. It does.
It becomes more Resident Evil-like.
Yeah, and the poor thing, the poor family, and the things that happen to their bodies.
Yeah, I truly love Resident Evil 7. I think it was a great direction. I think it takes us back to that survival horror.
Yeah, and I mean, as a franchise, they drop Biohazard. People are pleasantly surprised with Biohazard. It becomes a success of sorts, and then the remakes that follow.
So yeah, let's move into that. The era of remakes, which is where I'd say we are now. Some have been terrific, some not so much. Silent Hill HD Collection is a travesty. Hate it. So let's not talk about that because we're here to celebrate video games. Where are you on remakes?
Can I just jump straight into
Yeah.
the Doom games first of all.
Sure. I guess we didn't even mention that really, but Doom is a horror game.
Yeah,
It is.
100%. And again,
there was nothing more terrifying back in the day than hearing the Pinky Demon and just being like, it's somewhere. And I know it's here. And then some of them become invisible, and you're like, oh no, this is just terrible. Yeah, great. So the remakes of Doom, because they are remakes, really. We had Doom 2. We had Final Doom, and then we moved in and had Doom 3, which is a true survival horror game. It's not a Doom game, really. It's not Doom in style. It is a survival horror game. And as a survival horror game, I actually think Doom 3 is very underrated. I think it's actually a very good game. You just need to not approach it from the perspective of it being a Doom game. They're doing something very different.
Yeah. Doom 3 for me is one that stands out as the adrenaline side of Doom for me. It was, that's where I was like, oh yeah, we're playing Doom 3.
Actually creepy. Creepy game. And Doom 3 is effectively a remake of Doom from this other perspective. Then we get to 2016 and we get Doom 2016.
That soundtrack.
Which, again, is a remake of Doom, effectively. Although not, is it? It's not, because I believe Doom 2, I've not played through Doom 2, but I'm told that in the new Doom, or Doom Eternal, sorry, it's called.
Doom Eternal, yeah.
I'm told that it does actually link back to the original story. So it is actually a sequel to the original games, which I love.
I've seen that. I've watched a few streams of Eternal, and I have seen some links. Again, it's a new game, so I won't go too in depth with it because I want people to enjoy the game.
Absolutely. So, Doom 2016. When you pick up and play that, what were your initial thoughts of that?
It is like a shot of adrenaline straight into the neck.
I think it's an amazingly well crafted game. The movement, the sense of movement and motion in that game is like no other. It's one of the smoothest games I've ever played. In terms of, I can't really explain it. It's so fluid. The way you move, the way you climb, the way you jump. Basically, if in old Doom, if you weren't strafing, you're dead. In new Doom, if you're not running, you're dead. You need to move 100% of the time. And I think the video game does a very good job of facilitating that in the smooth motions. It's amazing.
100%. I would rather play the Doom 2016 than watch the Doom movie. Let's put it that way.
Either of them.
Yeah. The one with the rocking?
Oh, the first one, yeah.
Oh man, where it goes into first person,
it does,
because it tries to be Doom for a second.
I never understood. I never understood that. I always thought naturally, if you were going to do a Doom movie, you would make it a found footage movie, and it would just be like Aliens, where you've got the cameras and they're watching it from the APC. You'd just be seeing the head cameras, and that's the perfect way to do a Doom movie. Make it first person found footage movie. You got the camera on their helmets. You can literally make a Doom. You can make it look like Doom, and it'd be amazing.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating because I'm being a big fan of Doom as a franchise, being a big fan of Dwayne Johnson and also Carl Urban.
Oh yeah,
it was one of those.
The cast, was it? That had a pretty good cast actually when you look at it. It starts off well. Starts off well. That initial scene, I was like, huh, maybe this is going to be all right. And then it's not.
it's let's just say it's worth forgetting.
It is. I mean, for one thing, Doom is about a space marine or a space marines on Mars. It's set in space. It's set in a lab or an outpost, but it's not about aliens. It's not about mutated creatures of science. It is about hell invading. And that is the biggest crime that the Doom movie did.
Yes, I'll agree with you there. It took away the entire reason for Doom existing in that way.
Well, the entire reason I was watching, really.
Yeah. But I will say, stepping away from that travesty of a movie, we now have a solid Doom franchise that are making releases again. Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal are both looking to be up there with maybe the top 5 games of their year.
I'm very much looking forward to picking up Doom Eternal. Waiting for it to come down in price a bit because I am cheap, but it looks amazing.
It does. I mean, I'm watching streams of it so far. I haven't played it myself yet, but I couldn't wait.
No, me either. I've probably watched most of the game streamed because I needed to see it.
Yeah. It's still worth buying. It's still worth playing for me. Yeah.
But I agree. Doom 2016, sorry, Doom Eternal, tremendous games. And yeah, although they have linked them back, they are effectively remakes of Doom and Doom 2.
Yeah.
Remakes, obviously, like I said, the HD collection, I'm not sure that really counts as a remake. It's just a HD remaster, a terrible HD remaster, but an attempt. Resident Evil on the GameCube, later ported to the PS4. Have you played that game?
I never owned a GameCube.
Okay.
And
have you got the remastered version of that game?
I haven't, no.
How is it? Well worth picking up. It's amazing.
Okay.
The work they did to make that mansion creepy as all hell again. I think they did a tremendous job with the Resident Evil remake. It's really, really good. And it's probably very cheap for PS4 if you want to pick it up remastered. An amazing game. I think they've made some changes in the remaster, which makes it a bit easier, I think. But that aside, a tremendous game. Then we have like a decade, more than a decade, I guess, of nothing.
Yeah.
In terms of remakes. And then along comes this trailer for Resident Evil 2.
Did it make you feel like a gush of excitement when you saw that? Because
it made me feel like a kid again. It instantly took me back to Raccoon City.
Yeah.
And instantly took me back to my memories of Resident Evil 2 immediately, just even the trailer alone. And what a reveal, the way that trailer teased us, where it's like, what am I watching? Like, what is this? Because I watched it on the live stream.
Okay.
So I didn't know what it was because they didn't say what it was. It was just like, here's a trailer. And
what was that? Was it a Capcom stream or was it E3 or?
I think it was E3.
Yeah.
I think it was an E3. But I just remember watching it, not knowing what it was, and then it obviously you hear the voice and you're like, oh my god, could it be? Because for years they'd rumored that they were going to since the Resident Evil remake.
Yeah.
They've been, which I think was like 2003 or something, probably. They were talking about Resident Evil 2, and there'd been rumors for years that they were going to do it, and then you get to the point where you just give up and you're like, they're not going to do it. We just keep talking about it. It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it'll be like a Duke Nukem Forever, and it will just be like, oh, we waited all that time for nothing. And you see that trailer, and I immediately goosebumps, excitement, couldn't wait.
Oh yeah, I was buzzing for it, man, and well worth it as well. Well worth the wait.
Resident Evil 2 remake is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
An absolute masterpiece. It oozes atmosphere. The new opening they've added, the scene where as Leon you go into that gas station and stuff.
Yeah.
The convenience store. It's amazing. Such a good game. The changes they've made with like Mr. X and stuff. He's called Mr. X, isn't he?
I believe so. If I remember right. Yeah.
That is terrifying. When he first starts chasing you around, that terrified me. For me, for one thing, I will say, as someone who's absolutely bored of zombies, that game made zombies scary again.
Yeah, yeah.
There's that area where you have to climb under the door, and every time I did it, I was like, something's going to get me. And you've got that one area where it's just very dark, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but because it goes back to survival horror so well, you're limited on ammo.
Yeah.
And there was a part near the start, there's an area where I just didn't have ammo to take out the zombie, so I just left it there. And for most of the game, I was like, oh god, I've got to go back through there. Yeah. And I know it's there. I know he's there. It's gonna be there. Tremendous
Yeah.
game. But then
Well,
when that, sorry,
I was going to say there's two types of things that happen to me in that scenario. So one is I use all my limited ammo and then have nothing.
that was my first playthrough.
Yeah, end up
Because I thought,
restarting.
yeah, but that's the thing because obviously Resident Evil 7 returned to it, but you're so used to those third person shooters rather than horror games. For a moment, I was playing Resident Evil 2 like I would have done Resident Evil 6, and I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten my survival horror,
Yeah.
So yeah, my first playthrough, I got about halfway through, and then I was like, I can't go any further because I've cocked this up. I've not managed my resources correctly, and I'm not going to survive this.
Yeah.
And I actually had to restart the game with more common sense. and play it much more like a traditional Resident Evil game. And at that point, I love this remake.
Yeah,
I love it.
I am a big fan of it. I'm also. Have you seen any or have you touched any of 3?
No, I've not heard great things though, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say 2. Basically knocks 3 out of the water. I think some of that may be down to just sentimentality. Oh,
do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that. Nemesis is still badass.
Great. I mean, that was the key thing they needed to nail.
Yeah, Nemesis looks amazing, and he's terrifying. But the core game, I think, outside of Nemesis, I don't think it lives up to the remake of 2.
That is a shame.
Yeah, that's just my opinion, though.
How stressed were you with Mr. X chasing you around? Resident Evil 2, you're just trying to. It suddenly adds an edge to everything. There are moments of frustration, granted.
Oh yeah.
There are moments where I had to exploit Mr. X to try and solve a puzzle. But just that constant listening for footsteps and hearing him walking around above you or walking around outside and trying to be quiet and trying to solve puzzles suddenly becomes so much more stressful.
Yeah,
when
you feel like
relentlessly followed by this guy.
Yeah, you feel like you're on a time limit.
Always.
Yeah, and I think the sensory side of it, like you say, like the footsteps and hearing this and that, it adds so much depth to the level of fear that you would originally be feeling in that story. Nothing takes away the fact that Resident Evil 2, the original, is a great game whatsoever.
And still is to this day. Yeah. I still highly recommend if people have a PS1 or a PS2 or a fat PS3 that can play it. Resident Evil 2 still stands the test of time.
Oh yeah.
You just need to get used to the controls because obviously it's the old tank controls. But once you get back in that frame of mind, Resident Evil 2 is still terrific to this day.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the remake of 2, I don't think there will be a better remake. To be honest, if they, I don't think they'll carry on anyway. I think they've just kind of gone right. Okay, we've got Res 2, and Res 3. They've been remade. Those are the original trilogy. I think that's where it'll end. But
I secretly hope they do Code Veronica.
That would be cool.
That's the one game that I would like to see a remake of the Resident Evil series. After that, they're done. I agree. They're done.
I hope they don't. I hope they don't overdo it. Veronica, I'd be interested in seeing, but I hope they don't overdo it by maybe redoing 4 and then in the future 5 and 6, and
I just want them to take what they've learned from the remake of Resident Evil 2, and the mistakes presumably that they've apparently made with 3, though I've not played it yet, and just make something original now. Use that engine and everything you've created. Give us a new traditional Resident Evil game. It's not a remake. Do something new,
or just a completely new IP that's in that ballpark. Something that's
absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? Because you want new things. Always, you want new things. But there is just something about those franchises, especially your childhood franchises.
Yeah, man.
It's like, oh, that world. I just want to get back into that world, that Resident Evil world, that Silent Hill world. I've bought every single Resident Evil and Silent Hill game that's come out. Every single one. And Silent Hill games, most of them now are awful. Like, I mean, from like 4 onwards, the decline is steep and the games are not great. I still buy them because I just want so badly to have a good Silent Hill game again. I want to go back into that world. I want to be in that town.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel the same with Resident Evil. There's something about going back to that franchise. But I agree, we need new things too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going forward, it would be good to see some of those franchises take on some new tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
A really, really good VR Resident Evil would kick ass if they did it right. For example,
there is it's. Are you playing? By the way, are you playing Resident Evil 2 on PS4 or PC?
PS4.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a mod for the PC version where you can
a VR mod.
No, maybe right. I don't know. There may be, but it's a mod that is a first-person mod for Resident Evil 2.
Wow.
And that may sound like blasphemy, but once you've played through Resident Evil 2 third person, installing that mod and playing through Resident Evil 2 in first person, it's like a whole different game.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's even more terrifying, to be honest. It's tremendous.
You just kind of break away that wall a little bit more, don't you? And
it's just that extra level of immersion.
Yeah.
Now, I don't own any VR.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan. I like the concept. I just find that a lot of the games have been lacking.
Yeah.
For me, but I do think when we're talking the evolution of horror games, VR has to be the way. Because with horror, immersion is everything.
Yeah.
And VR is the logical step. Now, I've not played Biohazard VR, but I know people that have, and they were terrified.
Yeah, I haven't played it either. I currently don't have any VR myself. No. It is something I'm looking at. It's kind of the next big purchase, but
it is. I'm kind of waiting for the price to come down.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, it's kind of like you know, when it comes to I could buy VR or I could buy a new PC or upgrade my PC, I'd pick my PC every time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it?
It's justifying that because it's basically the price of another computer.
Yeah, 100%. It's an investment. It's a big investment, and the problem with it is if titles, you know, if the main thing you've got is escape rooms or poor titles or bad reviews on titles, then you're not going to spend out on that hardware.
Yeah.
But I mean, if, say, for example, Resident Evil 2 Remake was to have its full VR integration, I might just be like, that's enough for me to go and get it.
I think before long we'll have enough games to kind of justify VR. There probably are enough games already. But for me, VR would be perfect for horror games. That's the one thing, if I owned a VR headset or someone gave me one, I would just buy horror games for it. It's probably all I'd buy for it, to be honest.
100%.
It would absolutely be the logical step for me in horror, and I think it would be terrifying. Thinking of things like Alien Isolation in VR would just be like the most terrifying thing ever.
I don't want to think about that. That's just too much.
So I think we've pretty much covered horror here. I think we've probably missed out some games. I know I think we missed out like Condemned and things like that. But and Evil Within we didn't mention. But obviously we can't mention every single horror game. This is just our experiences with horror games. But
yes,
with all of this in mind, and our personal experiences and our personal lives with horror video games, give us a few that people should check out. We're in lockdown. People might as well spend some time playing some games.
Okay. So for me, a big horror game was Until Dawn.
Yes.
Until Dawn, which is choice based. So it's almost like, have you played like those decision making games like The Walking Dead and things like that?
Yeah, the Telltale stuff.
Telltale, that's the one. Yeah. It's very much like that in terms of how you progress the story.
Right.
However, you've got Hollywood actors and actresses modeled into a world where you're in kind of like a ski resort type place, like you're on a mountain in a cabin, basically. And it's the choice is either save you or get you killed. There's a mystery killer. and there's lots of different demons and monsters and things like that come along with it. It's a very, very good horror story-driven game. Then it's good to play through maybe 2 or 3 times and try different options as well, because you do get different outcomes.
It sounds tremendous. I have not played it, so I will check that out. Any more suggestions for people to play?
I would going slightly more in it. It's still horror. It's very Lovecraftian, but it does give you more of an action vibe as well. I'd say Bloodborne.
Yeah, sure.
Bloodborne for me is one of my favorite games of all time. At this moment in time, I love the Dark Souls games anyway, and From Software as a whole, as I've already mentioned. But Bloodborne for me is just, it calls upon that Lovecraftian, there are gods that you can't see.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And when it steps into that sort of maybe in the second third of the game, it just blows your mind. Absolutely. You go back to places you were previously, and because you've gained more insight, you can now see things that were always there but you couldn't see before.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating, and that keeps me going back. I still play Bloodborne now, and it came out in 2015. Very good game.
Fantastic. I will check both of those out. I've seen them. I haven't played them. So
cool. What would you have for me, Mr. Durs?
It depends how far back you want to go, really. I would definitely recommend trying to get some Project Zero or Fatal Frame.
Okay.
Tremendous games. Probably the second one's probably the best of the three. Tremendous game. I would suggest probably Call of Cthulhu. It's quite different, but that was a great game. In terms of more modern games, actually, and on PC, one of my favorite games growing up. It's got horror. It's a horror adventure game, effectively. Okay. It's one of the earliest kind of point and click horror adventure games / FPS. It's kind of a hybrid. It's called Realms of the Haunting, which I think you can get on GOG really cheap. Good old games.com. If you ever want old games, GOG.com. It's the place to go.
GOG.com.
Yeah, they make the game so that they will work on modern systems without problems. It's tremendous. Nice. So Realms of the Haunting I would recommend. But in terms of a new game, which I think I've had a lot of fun playing and I've spent a lot of hours on, is a game called Witch Hunt.
Okay.
Witch Hunt and also Darkwood I highly recommend. Darkwood's like a top-down horror game. Really well done. But Witch Hunt is tremendous. You're kind of you're a witch hunter or a monster hunter.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, I guess, 1800s probably.
Nice.
You are walking around with an old musket and rifle. Like a one shot then reload, and it takes a long time to reload each weapon, and a sword. And you basically have to go and hunt this witch. You're kind of brought there to hunt a witch. But along the way, you're hunting werewolves, you're hunting all these different creatures. And it's kind of like an open world sandbox area. But you can take down most things in like 1 or 2 shots, but they will kill you almost immediately if they catch you. So it's very survival horror-y. The fear of, because it's all muskets, you only get 1 shot. An enemy.
Right, yeah, because
so you get 2 shots maximum. You've got your rifle, you can shoot it with your rifle, then you have to quickly switch to your pistol, use your pistol, and then you're down to your sword. So if you miss with either of those shots, you're pretty much going to die. It's terrifying in places. Really good fun game. It's not a big game. It's probably like an indie game, I think, but really good fun. Witch Hunt, and like I said, Darkwood as well is a real disturbing top-down horror game. Highly recommend all of those.
Nice. I do actually have a few future recommendations as well.
Go for it.
So,
System Shock remake, by the way, if that ever happens, that will definitely be on the list.
Well, here's the thing. System Shock remake is not on my list here. However, I have seen a trailer for System Shock 3.
That'll do.
That is due in 2020.
Is it?
It's been announced as 2020, yeah.
No, I am excited.
Another one which stars, do you know Jack Rayner? He was in Midsummer. He's the British kid that plays the American kid in
Love Midsummer.
Yeah, there's a game with him as the main character in it called Little Hope.
Oh, okay.
Definitely worth checking out. Looks like a supernatural sort of thriller type game.
I will definitely check that out.
And one more for you, as I've already given you Cthulhu Book of Ancients.
You have.
100%, if you watch any trailer today, watch Hellseed Chapter 1's trailer. It's coming to Steam. I think it's an indie game by the looks of it, but it looks terrifying.
Oh, that's just reminded me of another thing. We're going to be here forever just going through these games. It's just, I will definitely check that out, but that has just reminded me. Lost in Vivo. That's a great little indie game. It's kind of got a very it's kind of made to look like a PS2 game, PS1, PS2 game in its graphics. First person, and it's very Silent Hill. I highly recommend Lost in Vivo. It's great.
Okay, let me just make a note of that.
It's got a mad premise.
That's amazing.
You're basically walking your dog in a storm, and then the dog gets washed down a drain. Oh, no. So you go down the drain to try and find your dog, and it takes you into this weird, crazy, horrific world. It's great.
Poor little papa.
He's all right.
I did have one more for you, if that's all right, Mr. Durs.
Go for it. We've got nothing but time.
Okay, I got two for you in that case. Okay, so imagine a world. You're in the modern day, and people just start fading out of existence, right?
Right.
People are fading out of existence, and you're left kind of looking around. Where are people? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, a badass dude in a bike helmet with magical powers comes and starts fighting the demons that are sucking you away.
Right.
Ghostwire Tokyo, come in 2020. Ghostwire Tokyo.
I will check that out. That sounds interesting.
And if you want mega original Silent Hill vibes,
I do.
A game called Someday You Will Return.
Ooh.
Watch the trailer for that and let me know what you think.
I will definitely do that. So a lot of recommendations, and I think we've pretty much covered horror.
We have. We've looked at the past, the present, the future, the remakes, the movies.
Everything we can.
Yeah.
I think that wasn't bad for our first podcast. Obviously, we are still social distancing, so this is done over Skype. So, any dropouts and all of that, apologies. But I think it's been pretty solid all the way through, actually. I think we've done pretty well here. Do you have a subject or a topic in mind for next time? Or shall we have a think about it?
Shall we maybe do a poll?
A poll?
Yeah.
We could do a poll, yeah, sure.
Maybe when we share this out when it goes live, we could put a little poll in place.
Sounds good to me.
And see what comes out of that. What do you think?
That sounds great. Let's leave it up to people.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Well, I think that'll about do it for this time. This was the Icons of Sin podcast, available everywhere, I think. It should be anyway. DursProductions.com, Spotify, Podbean, iTunes, everywhere, I think. And YouTube as well.
And YouTube.
But yeah, cheers for that, Daz. I'll catch you next week, man.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. We'll
awesome.
see how it goes with the poll, and I will catch you then, man.
Absolutely. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.